You're standing in a stone room with no windows. There's a mirror 6 inches from your face, held by a man in black robes who hasn't blinked in over a minute. He's not looking at you. He's looking at your reflection, at your eyes, measuring something you can't control. And in 18 months, what he writes in his ledger about the size of your pupils will be cited as proof that you deserve to burn. Her name was Isabel de Avila. She was 31 years old, a seamstress in Toledo with steady hands and a daughter who braided her hair every morning before Mass. And right now, in this room that smells like ink and fear, men are documenting the diameter of her pupils when she looks at the cross, not for medicine, for evidence. Before we go any further, I have 2 nowhere in the world are you watching this from? Because it genuinely amazes me that a story buried in Spanish archives for 4 centuries can reach someone on the other side of the planet. Drop a comment. Let me know you're here. This is 1586. The Spanish Inquisition has been operating for over a century, and by now, most people think they know what it was. Torture chambers, heretics screaming on the rack, Jews forced to convert or flee, flames in public squares. That's all documented. That all happened. But here's what the numbers reveal that the stories don't. Between 1480 and 1590, the Inquisition interrogated over 44,000 people. They executed roughly 3,000. Horrific, yes, but what were they doing with the other 41,000 hours? The answer is in ledgers that most historians never open. Archives in Valladolid, in Seville, in Toledo rooms full of documents that aren't confession transcripts. They're observation logs. Subject perspired when asked about Sabbath observance. Subject's hands remained dry when touching crucifix. Subject failed to produce tears during passion recitation. Observed for consecutive times, page after page. Woman after woman. Pulse rates. Pupil dilation. Sweat production. Trembling duration. The Inquisition wasn't just prosecuting heresy. They were building a catalog of how flesh betrays what the mind conceals. And they had one population they practiced on more than any other. By 1580, nearly 60% of those brought before tribunals in Castile were women. Not because women committed more heresy, because inquisitors believed women's bodies would reveal it more clearly. They thought the female body was more transparent, more honest, less capable of concealment. And they spent 3 centuries testing that theory on living subjects. So when Isabel's door opened that September morning, when 2 familiars of the Holy Office showed her a rolled parchment with a wax seal, when they told her she was summoned for questioning, she already knew. Everyone knew. By 1586. Converso families had been teaching their daughters for 3 generations how to make their bodies lie. The audience chamber doesn't look like a torture room. That's deliberate. It's almost bureaucratic. 1 table, 3 chairs, a crucifix on the wall. Window with iron bars, but sunlight still comes through. The ordinariness is part of the method, and yes, they had a method. Written down, codified. The Directorium Inquisitorum, composed by Nicolau Imeric in 1376 and revised 6 times by 1580. Here's what it says about the first 72 hours. The accused who enters in terror will confess to anything. The accused who enters in composure will reveal everything. They didn't want panic. They wanted observation. Because terrified people are useless for what they're actually trying to do. Isabel sits in that room for 7 hours before anyone speaks to her. Just sits. To notaries watch from behind a wooden screen. They're not writing her confession. She hasn't said anything. They're writing descriptions. Subject shifts position every 9 minutes. Subject touches face 6 times in first hour. Subject's breathing rate increases when footsteps approach door. They're cataloging her. And here's the detail that reframes everything. Isabel doesn't know it yet, but she's already failed to tests. Not tests of faith. Tests of biology. In 1486, two Dominican inquisitors published a book called Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. Most people know it as a witch-hunting manual. It is. But buried in Part 2, Question 1, Article 6, there's a theory that the body touched by evil would respond differently than a pure body. That conversion to Christianity wasn't just spiritual, it was physiological. That when someone genuinely accepted Christ, their nervous system would change. Their tears would come easier during Mass. Their pulse would quicken before the Eucharist. Their pupils would dilate at the sight of the Virgin. And if those responses didn't happen, the body was remembering something else. By 1530, there were Inquisition physicians. Not to heal, to measure. They had instruments. Calipers for measuring pupil dilation, water clocks for timing pulse rates, graduated vials for collecting and measuring tears. In Seville in 1537, a tribunal spent 4 months testing this theory. They brought in 50 confirmed conversus Jews who'd converted to Christianity and 50 old Christians, people whose families had been Catholic for generations. Then they ran both groups through identical religious exercises while measuring physical responses. The results are still in the archive. They showed no consistent difference. None. The conversos cried, didn't cry, trembled, stayed calm, dilated, constricted in the exact same random patterns as the old Christians. One of the inquisitors, Francisco Pina, wrote in the margin, "The flesh does not differentiate what the soul contains. Our instruments detect nothing." And then he wrote one more sentence. "Continue observations. Expand sample size." They knew their method didn't work. By 1537, they had proof. They used it for another 150 years. Back to that room. It's been 19 hours since Isabel's arrest. She hasn't slept, hasn't eaten anything but bread and water. The window behind her shows night now. Finally, an inquisitor enters. His name is in the records, Alonso de Guzman. He's 54. He's been doing this for 18 years. He carries a wooden case about the size of a prayer book. He doesn't sit across from Isabel. He sits beside her, close enough that she can smell the ink on his clothes. The questions start, but they're not about Judaism. Not at first. Describe your wedding night. Isabel blinks, hesitates. She's been married 12 years. What does this have to do with heresy? Guzman opens the wooden case. Inside, a glass vial, the thin brass rod with millimeter markings. A small mirror. "I asked you to describe your wedding night. Did you feel joy?" She answers, "Yes, of course." "Did you weep?" "No." Should she have? Guzman makes a note. Then he asks about her daughter's birth, whether she prayed during labor, which saint she invoked, whether she felt ecstasy's his word, ecstasy when the child first breathed. Isabel is trying to figure out the right answer, but there isn't one, because he's not listening to her words. He's watching her carotid artery. The notary behind the screen is timing her pulse with a water clock, counting how many beats pass while water drips from one chamber to another. Then Guzman does something that appears in dozens of Inquisition transcripts but is almost never discussed in history books. He takes out the mirror, holds it 6 inches from Isabel's face, asks her to look at the crucifix on the wall while he watches her reflection. What is he looking at? Her pupils. In the records, there's a notation. Subject's pupils constricted when viewing crucifix. Expected dilation absent. Inconsistent with documented response of genuine converts. Expected by whom? Based on what? There's no citation, no reference. Just an assertion that Isabel's eyes should have responded differently. But here's the detail that makes this worse. Isabel knows what he's doing, because by 1586, everyone knows. Converso families have been teaching their daughters for 2 generations how to perform the right physical responses. Cry when you take communion. Let your hands shake when you kiss the cross. Practice dilating your pupils by looking at candlelight before bed. Isabel has practiced. She's 31 years old, and she's spent 15 of those years making her body lie. And it's still not enough. After 23 hours of interrogation, Isabel is taken to a cell. Not a dungeon, not yet. A room 10 feet by 12. One candle, a straw mattress, a bucket, and a cellmate. Her name is Maria Sanchez. She's 47. She tells Isabel she's been here for 2 weeks, accused of reading prohibited books. She seems kind, exhausted, sympathetic. She's lying. This is in the Inquisition manuals too. Section titled Detestibus Occultus on Hidden Witnesses. When observation alone fails to produce evidence, place a cooperative witness in the cell. Instruct her to befriend the accused. Record all conversations. Promise leniency in exchange for testimony. They called these women oreaziers, former accused who'd traded information for freedom. Sometimes they were genuine prisoners who'd agreed to inform. Sometimes they were Inquisition employees who'd never been accused at all. Just trained to play the role. Maria asks gentle questions. What was your life like before this? Do you have children? Are you afraid? Isabel, alone and terrified and desperate for human connection, talks. She talks about her daughter, about her husband who died 3 years ago, about how she lights candles on Friday nights. Not for the Sabbath, she insists Friday is when she cleans the house. Behind the wall, a notary writes it all down. 3 days later, Isabel will be confronted with a transcript of everything she said to Maria letters, including things she doesn't remember saying, including things she definitely didn't say, but can't prove she didn't. Because who's going to believe her over a written record? But here's where the method becomes something worse than entrapment. Because Maria doesn't just ask questions, she performs. At night, when the candle burns low, Maria prays. Loudly, with trembling hands and tears streaming down her face. She clutches the wooden rosary they've allowed her to keep. And she weeps, genuinely weeps, while reciting the Paternoster. Isabel watches, and she knows. She has to know. This is a demonstration. This is what genuine Christian devotion is supposed to look like. This is the standard her own body is being measured against. So Isabel tries, she prays, she cries. She makes her hands shake. But the notary records, subject's tears inconsistent. Ceased abruptly when cellmate stopped praying. Its physiological response suggests performance rather than genuine devotion. They're not just spying on her words, they're grading her grief. On the 9th day, Isabel confesses. She admits to lighting candles on Friday, to avoiding pork when she could, teaching her daughter a Hebrew blessing she learned from her grandmother, to keeping a small cloth with Hebrew letters sewn into the hem, hidden in a trunk. The inquisitors listen, record everything, ask follow-up questions. How many Fridays? Which specific prayers? Where did she get the cloth? Isabel answers it all. She's weeping now, genuinely weeping, because she thinks this is over. She thinks confession means reconciliation. Forced to do public penance, yes. Made to wear the San Benito, the yellow garment that marks penitence, yes. But alive, home with her daughter. Gizman closes the ledger, thanks her, tells her she'll be moved to a different cell while they prepare her reconciliation ceremony. Isabel is escorted out. The door closes. And then Guzman writes something that appears in thousands of Inquisition files. A single sentence that determines whether someone lives or dies. Subject's confession exhibits physiological inconsistency. What does that mean? Means Isabel confessed wrong. Not that she confessed to the wrong things, but that her body, while confessing, didn't display the right responses. A 1561 manual by Inquisitor General Fernando de Valdez listed signs of true repentance. Copious tears, trembling spreading from hands to torso, faintness at the weight of sin. Controlled or muted reactions marked the calculating. Isabel cried, but not enough. She trembled, but only in her hands. She didn't faint. Verdict: not repentant. Secret Jew, execution eligible. By 1586, families coached confessions hyperventilate collapse, seem crushed by sin. Too much performance, guilty. Too little, guilty. The right grief was a moving target, shifting with every tribunal, inquisitor, and notary's judgment of authentic suffering. You couldn't win. The system was designed so you couldn't win. In 1998, a researcher named Carmen Hernandez was working in the archive of the Royal Chancery of Valladolid. She was examining Inquisition trial records for her dissertation. Routine work. But she noticed something in the margins of a 1629 procedural manual. Handwritten notes, not official entries. Personal annotations made by inquisitors themselves. One note next to a section on physiological observation techniques. Garcia observed 18 subjects under identical conditions. No correlation between pupil dilation and confession validity. Method unreliable. Another note, dated 1638. Tested tear measurement protocols. Old Christians and conversos show identical range of responses. Physiological detection cannot distinguish belief. And then, dated 1647. Aware method lacks foundation. Continue use pending alternative procedure. They knew. By 1629, they knew their science of body reading didn't work. And they didn't just continue using it. They expanded it. Between 1640 and 1690, the number of physiological observation tools documented in Inquisition inventories actually increased. More mirrors, more calipers, more water clocks. More detailed instruction manuals on what measurements to take and how to interpret them. Hernandez found tribunal records from 1660 to 33. Years after inquisitors had privately acknowledged the method was worthless. Where women were still being convicted based on insufficient tear production, inadequate pupil dilation, and controlled breathing inconsistent with genuine remorse. Why? If they knew it didn't work, why keep doing it? The answer is in another margin note. This one from 1641, written by Inquisitor Juan de San Martin. The method's value lies not in accuracy of detection, but in efficacy of control. When subjects believe their bodies can betray them, they police themselves. This is preferable to forced compliance. Read that again. The point wasn't to find secret Jews. The point was to make people so afraid of their own nervous systems that they'd regulate themselves. Make your own flesh the enemy. Make authentic emotion impossible because every tear, every tremor might be evidence against you. And it worked. For generations, converso families didn't just hide their religious practices. They taught their children to control their physiological responses, to never cry too much or too little, to calibrate their trembling, to suspect their own biology. The Inquisition didn't need to watch everyone all the time. They just needed everyone to believe they were being watched, and to believe that their bodies would give them away. Isabel de Avila was executed on November 8, 1588, not in secret. In public, in Toledo's Plaza de Zocodover, in front of a crowd estimated at 5,000 people. The ceremony took 7 hours. First, the procession. Isabel and 11 others, 9 women. 2 men walked from the Inquisition prison to the plaza wearing San Benitos, painted with flames and devils. Their crimes were read aloud. Isabel's list: lighting candles on the Jewish Sabbath, refusing pork, teaching Hebraic prayers to her daughter. Confession lacking physiological consistency with genuine repentance. Body failing to display adequate signs of divine grace. That last line killed her. Not the candles or the prayers, but her body. Her pupils didn't dilate enough. Her tears were insufficient. Her hands trembled, but not convincingly. Her body failed the test, so her body burned. The sentence was relaxed to the secular armed church language for handing her to civil execution. Tied to a stake, wood piled at her feet. She was offered mercy, confess properly, and be garroted before the fire. Isabel confessed again, said everything right, But the notary recorded, no adequate trembling, voice steady, eyes dry. They burned her alive. Her daughter, Catalina, 7, was required to watch. Her testimony survives. 18 years later, she said, "Truth meant nothing if the body betrayed you. Survival meant training the body to lie better." Catalina lived. She learned how. She survived by becoming what the Inquisition demanded, a woman whose body was an unreadable performance, whose every physiological response was calculated, whose authentic self was buried so deep that even she couldn't find it. The Spanish Inquisition officially ended in 1834, but the method didn't die. Salem witch trials. Women dunked in water to see if they'd sink or float. Searched for witches' marked areas of skin that wouldn't bleed when pricked. Observed for signs that their bodies had been altered by demonic influence. Same logic. The guilty body will reveal itself. 1933 to 1945. Nazi scientists measured skulls, eyes, noses, seeking Jewish traits even in converts. Ancestry lives in biology. The body remembers what the mind hides. 1950s, 1960s. American polygraphs measured heart rate, blood pressure, skin conductance, trying to detect lies. The body betrays the mind. Each claimed science, collected data, documented patterns, and targeted those institutions wished to control. Isabel de Avila's file case 4219 rests in Toledo. 43 pages record her pulse, pupils, tears, tremors, conversations, confessions. Final note, relaxed to the secular arm. November 8, 1588. Age 31. Execution confirmed. No further observation necessary. Teresa of Avila wrote in 1577, "I am more afraid of those who are so afraid of the devil than of the devil himself." Isabel Catalina, 60,000 others endured more than death. Every emotion became evidence. Her daughter kept a piece of cloth with Hebrew letters sewn into her dress. 41 years. Hidden, unreadable, perfectly secret.